Having played Maple just about every day for the past few years, I think I have a fairly decent understanding nowadays of gear progression, so I'm gonna share my thoughts in this video. One note before I start. You'll want to prioritize gear that gets boss flames, which are flames on items from bosses that go like over twice as high as what you'd normally get from a similarly leveled item, either from shops or monster drops. Let's start with armor. From when you job advance at typically level 10 for most classes, all the way up to level 100, you're fine with just using whatever gear drops in maps as you grind in said maps. If you're a burning character during a burning event, at 100 it would be best to use your frozen gear set because its set bonus and base stats are just really good and fine to use up until Penciler at level 140 honestly. For non-burning characters, you can still use the gear that drops in the maps up to Penciler at 140. The set bonuses from 100 to 140 are useful as they give damage to normal monsters, which speeds up grinding a fair bit, and common armor drops cap off at Penciler, so you'll have plenty of backups or chances for better flames or better potentials, etc. just from grinding. At 150 is when you can start to get rid of your Penciler and instead opt for the Chaos Rudibus hat top and bottom. Most players won't be able to get this until well after they hit 200 plus, especially on reboot, but that's the earliest level you can technically obtain it at. Burning event characters can get temporary CRA gear at 150, and everyone else has to get them through getting 5 squares from each boss for each armor piece. This armor set is essentially endgame armor for most players, as this set has a top and bottom that have separate potentials and Star Force power, and the only other thing that replaces it in the game at all is the Eternal set, which you get from defeating way endgame bosses past Black Mage, like Kalos and Kaling, and presumably whatever else comes after them in future updates. Onto gloves, shoulders, shoes, and capes. I grouped these 4 together because they all share similar set types right up through all armor tiers, whereas ideally for most classes you'll just want to stop at CRA for the hat top and bottom. However, there's 2 exceptions to this. The first is shoulder, because you can get a royal black metal shoulder from all difficulties of Magnus. The second is cape, where you can get a tyrant cape from Hard Magnus or Wings of Fate from doing the Mushroom Shrine questline. There's also Enraged Zakum cape, which can transfer into Evo Lab. That being said, once you're able to move off of Penciler, the next big step up would be Evo Lab. This requires having done the prequests for both Lotus and Damien, as well as weeklies for the Evo Lab coins, which altogether you should unlock and get around 200 or so at the earliest. There are other fringe options like Ranmaru, Von Leon, or Necromancer set from Hilla, but I wouldn't recommend any of these really, mainly because they're a bit harder to obtain and would get outclassed and be replaced very shortly after. They're an option if you absolutely wanted something else, but they're not necessary. Penciler is good enough to carry you up through into Lotus and Damien, more so if you have a group to fight the lads with. After Evo Lab, the only other step up is right to Arcane Umbra through doing Lucid and Will. If you do the hard mode versions of them, they have a chance of dropping boxes that give arcane gear, which is a huge time save, but otherwise you'll just have to grind out getting droplets from them every week until you've saved up to buy arcane armor. One more thing. For the potential of gloves, once you get their potential to legendary, you'll want at least 1 line of percent crit damage, as each one of these outweighs any other lines you can get on gloves. Once you start upgrading your gloves a bit more, you can aim for 2 crit damage lines. It's possible to get 3, but it's so near impossibly low that I wouldn't worry about that. For androids, your choices are to either craft both a heart and android through Ardent Mail and finding their recipes, or buying a fairy heart and whichever event android is in the current events shop for 4 bill mesos plus however many event coins the android costs. You could skip the fairy heart and just use the permanent Lydium heart the event android comes with, but if you have the money, fairy heart is always worth it as it's the best heart you can get at the moment in reboot. Sometimes they have events with better hearts, but those haven't come back for a few years. The endgame heart for MapleStory would be the Black Lotus heart, which is part of the pitch drop set. For badges, at level 33 you get a quest in your light bulb called Have You Learned About Pets? Click through all that dialogue, and not only do you get a temporary 3-day pet with auto HP and MP, you also get a badge with a tiny bit of stats. It's not a lot, but I'm pretty sure it's the only badge you get early on. After that, the next one is the Crystal Ventus badge from Magnus. Honestly, one takeaway from this video, if anything, is for me to say, just do the Magnus pre-quests, since it gives so many useful items across all your characters that don't get outclassed or replaced for a long while. The only other things that replace this badge are the Monster Parker 7-day badge, which you can get if you're extremely lucky with Monster Park boxes, but just expect and assume it'll cost you 105 billion mesos, unironically. Besides that, the only other option is Genesis badge, which you get all the way later at Black Mage. And that's it for badges. For pocket slot, your options are fairly limited. First off, it unlocks at level 30 charm. Second, you have like 3 good options. Stone of Eternal Life from normal and hard basic Hilla, which doesn't have too great of flames. And then Pink Holy Cup from Pink Bean that drops from both normal and chaos. This is the one most people will use for a long while, as it gets good high boss flames and is way easier to obtain than the third, last endgame option. Cursed Spellbook from Hard Will. It has high boss flames and it's part of the pitched boss set. Accessories are a bit more in-depth because you have a whole boatload of options to choose from, and most are fairly good. I'll go slow and start with just the rings. At level 60 you get 2 quests, one for an early level 30 shoulder, and another after that one for a ring that gives 3 attack and 2 all stats. It can't be enhanced in any way though. For other rings, early on you'll want to aim for cracked or solid rings from Easy and Normal Gollux, Silver Blossom ring from Horntail, Ephia's / Noble Ephia's ring from Von Leon, and Treasure Hunter John's ring from New Leaf City. As you upgrade your rings, you'll want to swap these out for any rings that are stronger or have higher stats, Star Force and potential, such as Event Rings, Superior and Reinforced Rings from Gollux coins in the shop, Kana's Treasure Ring from Princess No, Guardian Angel Ring from Slime, and Meister Ring from Crafting. Meister Ring takes a while to get as you need to get Meister Rank accessory crafting, but people still like it because it can go to 22 stars and you can get a ton of backups while you're at Meister Rank. Finally, the 4 best in slot rings you'll want are Endless Terror, Superior and Reinforced Gollux Ring, and Guardian Angel Ring. If and when you get Endless Terror, this will replace either Meister or Kana Ring. I'd check how much stats you gain and lose from each ring by clicking your scroll wheel or middle button on your mouse down. There's also Glona's Heart from Phantom Forest, but that one is incredibly outlandish and super grindy and is an impossibility for most people. It would take years to perfect that on both regular and reboot servers, so I wouldn't worry about that one. Next up on the accessories menu is Pendants. You can get 2 from Horntail. Horntail Necklace from Normal Mode and Chaos Horntail Necklace from Chaos Mode. Also, both necklaces give percent health, which is pretty useful for Demon Avenger and Kana early on. You can also equip both the Normal and Chaos necklaces in both pendant slots. If you wanted more gear to drop, there's also Greed Pendant from Monster Park Special Shop for 150 coins that boosts specifically equipment drop rate by 20%. Past that, there's both Arcarium Pendants, Mechanator, and Dominator. Both are good, you can equip both at the same time, but Dominator is way better and can item transfer up to other better pendants like Superior Engraved Gollux Pendant. There's also Sweetwater Pendant from Commercy, which when transposed is usable almost all the way to endgame, even after the Flame Transpose nerf. It takes a few days to get, but I'd say it's worth it if you wanted to grind it out. The last 2 pendants that you'll want later on are Daybreak Pendant and Source of Suffering. Source of Suffering replaces Sweetwater Pendant right as you get that, and Daybreak Pendant replaces Superior Gollux when you have at least like 6 pitched boss set pieces. Earrings are pretty simple. You can stick with any that drop in maps up to level 130 or so. Then you have 2 boss earring options. From Normal Hilla, she drops Will of the Wisps, and from Horntail, he drops Decidius earrings. Decidius? I don't know. Both of these are similar in level stat and boss flames, with Hilla's earrings having 50 more defense and 2 more all stats. It's really not that big of a deal. Past those, you have the Gollux earrings up to Superior. Eventually, you'll want the full Superior Gollux set, as its set bonus is amazingly good, but early on, there's no shame in settling for something smaller, like Solid and Reinforced. They're both really good base stats wise too. The endgame for earrings is Commanding Force earrings from Hard Mode Darknell. Again, the drop rate is way low, so you don't have to worry about that until you're in like Cernium at the earliest. Also, like the V-Hilla pendants, they're only good and replace the Gollux earrings once you have a bunch of other pitched boss items. Belts have a few options that are all fairly good. Early on, you can get the Sailor Belt from Rihanna Straight at level 30. You can also craft some belts from 40 to 120 through accessory crafting. They aren't that amazing though, and they'll be replaced shortly after with things like Enraged Zachem Belt from Chaos Zachem or Golden Clover Belt from Pink Bean. Honestly, even the Nova Belt that drops from Magnus is really good early on too. Once you get a Reinforced or Superior Golux Belt though, you can replace all of these. Beyond that, the endgame for belts would be Dreamy Belt. But even still, you wouldn't want to replace your 4-set Golux until you fill out most of your pitched boss set. For face accessories, you can start off with the Sailor Mask from Rihanna Straight, again at level 30. Afterwards, all the way at level 100, or whenever you choose to fight him, Zachem drops a 110 face that you'll more than likely stick with for some time on most characters. The next step up is either Sweetwater Tattoo from Commercy, or Twilight Mark from both normal and hard modes of Lucid and Will. The best endgame face you can get after that is Berserked from hard mode Lotus. I'd honestly recommend just sticking with Twilight Mark for a fair bit of time, as you'll more than likely end up with way more backups for that instead of Berserked, if you do those bosses regularly. Eye accessories start at Fairy Mark from L&L Academy at, again, level 30. At 100, Zachem can drop an Aquatic Letter Eye, which is pretty nice, but Pink Bean can drop an even better item called Black Bean Mark for level 135. This one is way harder to obtain, but Chaos Papilladus also drops an eye called Papilladus Mark. No, really, all of these are honestly good to hold on to too, just because later down the line you can turn them into % Mesa or % Drop Gear. They all have fairly similar stats and boss flames too, so don't worry too much if you can't get one over the other. They're all part of the base boss set and they all have fairly similar stats. The last option past the boss drops for eyes would be the Sweetwater Monocle from Commercy. Pat Mark does transpose onto this if you get one and want to put in all the effort of transposing it too, I guess. And as usual, the endgame for eyes is again another pitched boss set item, Magic Eye Patch from hard mode Damien. Totems you really don't have much options for outside of events or legacy. You get a set of 4 of them from Afterlands, and they have a 3-set bonus for any 3 that you choose. The newly released Guild Castle also has some totems that are slightly better overall than Afterlands, but it takes a little bit of time for guilds to unlock the shop that sells them for 1.5 bill. The only other year-round for everyone option is the U Garden totems that do technically give better stats and a way better set bonus, but they're all temporary with a 30-day duration and extremely tedious to grind out each one. It's worth it if you want to put in all that effort, I guess. Honestly though, I wouldn't worry about it or regularly prioritize these. It's too much effort. Lastly, to end this video off, we got the main course, the breadwinners, the meat and potatoes, the 3 big ones that everyone swears by, and the one that arguably gets you the most gains from not only switching to the next best one, but also just from enhancing them. Weapon, Secondary, and Emblem. People typically shorten these 3 to WSE as they categorize these together, because they get similar potentials. Getting the easiest ones out of the way first. Emblems typically don't upgrade past the gold emblem for all classes at level 100. The only upgrade you'll ever get for emblem is through Saren, called Mitra's Rage. It's super good and super worth it, and it's part of the pitch boss set, but it's quite a ways off for most players. Next we have Secondaries. Again, just stick with what you're given as you level up and job advance. The one exception to this being if you have a frozen secondary from a burning event character. For classes that use shields, you can craft these through normal smithing and ardent mill, and those classes' endgames are the Deimos shields. The recipes for these drop from monsters around Future Irv, or right from Cygnus herself. For some fringe case classes endgame secondaries, Dual Blader will want to use a Fafnir Tsukuyomi Katara, transposed onto a Sweetwater Katara. Kanas use just another of their main weapon as their secondary, so I believe their endgame would be another Arcane Umbra fan equipped onto Haku. Lastly, Demon Slayers and Demon Avengers would want to use Ruin Force Shield that drops from Damien, both normal and hard modes. The endgame for all other classes is typically Princess No's secondary you get from getting 15 of her square fragments as drops. It varies from class to class if it's actually used, so you'll have to check other sources just to be certain, but typically you're okay just aiming to get your best in slot secondary from her. It's not an upgrade potential wise, but it's 6 extra attack and 4 extra main and secondary stats if you're willing to grind it out. That's not bad. And finally, weapons. Stick with whatever you can use around your level up to 100 or so. Zakum can drop a decent level 110 boss flame weapon for your class whenever you do fight him, but if none drops, you can keep sticking with weapons that drop from enemies. Frozen weapon for burning event characters are extremely good too. At 140, Utgard weapons are a good settle until you either get a Fafnir weapon from doing Chaos Root Abyss, or a Sweetwater weapon from Commercy that drops from Voyages or the PQ. If you're a two-handed sword class, I'll also mention Magnus has a very low chance of dropping a really good weapon called Kaiserium, which is extremely usable up past Evo Lab. The next step up would be Evo Lab from Lotus and Damien for that juicy 5-set bonus for Evo Lab gear. This is a good stopping point for boss mules. Up above that is the Arcane Umbra weapon. This line of gear gets a higher tier of potential lines over Abso, and is what you'll be using up to Black Mage. The final highest endgame weapon you get is Genesis weapon from Black Mage. You initially get a sealed one and have to unlock the seal of this through Liberation, but it takes about 8 months total, with you being able to do 1 Liberation mission a month, I believe. All these missions are doing challenge modes of much harder bosses. And that's it. For good potential lines for all 3 of these, you'll ideally want mostly percent attack and a few boss lines, with at max a couple ignore enemy defense lines if you need it. They all share mostly similar potential lines, with the exception being Emblem, which can't get boss damage. If you wanted to go past that, use Bright Cubes again for a better chance at double prime lines or sometimes even triple prime. One more thing, if you're playing Zero, you should really Star Force your weapon up to 21 or 22 stars while it's still between types 5 and 7, since they'll retain their stars when you upgrade them later, and it'll cost a lot less. And they get infinite backups of their weapon, since they can't boom their weapon. It's a bit of an investment, but it's incredibly worth it. It's a lot to take in, which is why I tried sectioning off this video into a few gear categories. I put chapters in the video description too in case anybody wanted to refer back to certain segments. Enhancing the gear through star forcing and potentials is the same across the board, so I didn't want to drill in throughout the video to do that since most players understand how to do those systems eventually anyways. The one exception to this is cubes. For tiering up to legendary, use bright cubes. They have the highest tier up chance. Once it's legendary, use glowing cubes until you get something you're happy with. There are still some people out there that still don't know that, and I just wanted to mention that to save people time and money. If you get free cubes from bosses or events, yeah, throw them at whatever you want. But if you're buying cubes, don't buy hard cubes from general shops just to tier stuff up. It's a waste. I think I really want to do some class guides next, so if you have any ideas of classes you want me to cover, let me know. I'm not some savant in every class in this game, but I have played every single class in the game to minimum 5th job, so they're all level 200 at the least, and I understand most of them well enough to go over their quirks and how to make playing them a bit easier. Personally, I know what class I want to go over first, so look forward to that soon. That's all.